Once upon a time, in a quiet village nestled between rolling hills and green forests, there lived a humble orphan named Lira. The village was peaceful, its air always filled with the scent of fresh grass and the hum of birds in the distance. Yet, despite the serenity of her surroundings, Lira felt a deep sense of emptiness. Her heart longed for something beyond the simple life she knew. She was always the outsider, her soul restless, and her thoughts scattered like the stars above the calm night sky. Every day, Lira would wander through the village, her eyes gazing upward, searching for a connection to something greater. She could never shake the feeling that she was meant for more than just this small, quiet place. But what that more was, she couldn't quite understand. Her dreams, strange and unsettling, haunted her nights. In these dreams, she would ascend into the sky, her body floating higher and higher, until she stood among the stars. And always, a soft voice, distant yet familiar, would call her name. Lira. It whispered, echoing through the vastness of the universe. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, as if the entire cosmos knew her name. Each time she woke, Lira would shake off the remnants of the dream, but it left her with a lingering sense of wonder, and a deep ache in her chest. Who was calling her? And why did it feel like something was missing? Lira's dreams grew more vivid with each passing night. At first, they were merely whispers of the moon, but soon they became a full-fledged vision. She could see herself standing upon the moon's silver surface, her bare feet touching the cold, gleaming ground. Above her, the stars twinkled like distant memories, and the sky stretched out endlessly, a canvas of pure darkness. She felt a strange pull, as though the moon itself were calling to her, beckoning her closer. In these dreams, the voice that once whispered her name grew louder, more urgent. It wasn't just a voice, it was a presence, ancient and powerful. Lira. It would call, and every time she heard it, a shiver ran down her spine. As the voice spoke, she could feel a warmth spreading through her chest, as though a part of her had awakened from a long slumber. One night, as Lira stood on the moon, the stars above her seemed to form shapes, patterns, and symbols she couldn't understand. The constellations shifted, their lines intertwining, and suddenly, everything clicked into place. The voice spoke again, this time with clarity. "You are the last descendant of the moon goddess," it said, the words reverberating in her mind. "The one chosen to restore the balance that has been lost." Lira's heart skipped a beat. Could it be true? Was she really the last of an ancient line, the heir to a goddess who once ruled the heavens? She woke with a start, her heart racing, the moon's light still lingering in her thoughts. The voice, the revelation, it was no longer just a dream. Something was awakening inside her, and she knew her life would never be the same again. The days that followed were filled with confusion and wonder for Lira. She couldn't shake the vividness of her dreams, nor could she dismiss the weight of the revelation. The voice in her mind, though silent in the waking world, had left its mark on her heart, a constant reminder of something greater than herself. She tried to ignore it, going about her daily life in the village, but the pull was undeniable. She felt as though she was being guided, pulled towards something she couldn't see yet. One afternoon, as she wandered the village's edge, Lira encountered an old woman sitting by a well. The woman was hunched, her silver hair falling in waves down her back, her eyes sharp despite her age. She looked at Lira as if she had been waiting for her, her gaze steady and knowing. "You've heard the voice," the woman said, her voice raspy but firm. "The one that calls you to the stars." Lira's heart skipped. "How do you know?" she whispered. "I have waited many years for you," the woman replied, her eyes glimmering with ancient wisdom. "You are the last of the moon goddess bloodline. It is your destiny to awaken her power and restore the balance of the heavens." Lira felt her breath catch in her throat. She had known deep down that the voice she had heard was no mere dream, but hearing it spoken aloud made it all too real, too overwhelming. The woman continued, her voice filled with both reverence and sorrow. "The Eclipse King, a dark force, stirs in the shadows. Only you can stop him, but the path ahead is fraught with danger. Your journey will not be easy, but you must walk it if you are to save the moon and all of us." The weight of the woman's words settled heavily on Lyra's shoulders. Her heart raced with fear, but also a strange sense of purpose. It was time to leave her quiet village behind. The moon's call was no longer just a dream, it was her reality. The days that followed were filled with frantic preparations. Lira knew she couldn't ignore her destiny any longer, but the thought of leaving everything behind, her home, her simple life, the only world she had ever known, was terrifying. Yet, the ancient woman's words echoed in her mind like a steady drumbeat, urging her forward. The Eclipse King was real, and if the moon goddess within her could not awaken in time, the world itself would fall into darkness. With a heavy heart, Lira packed what little she could carry: a satchel of food, a warm cloak, and a small pendant, a gift from the woman that she had once thought was only a token of goodwill. Now, it felt like a symbol of the responsibility she carried. Before leaving, Lira went to the village square to say her farewells. The people of the village had always been kind to her, and though she had never felt truly connected to them, she knew she would miss the comforting routine of village life. But there was no turning back now. The moon's call was louder than anything the village could offer. As she walked to the edge of the village, her heart heavy with both fear and resolve, a figure appeared before her. It was the prince, the one she had met in the shadows of her dreams. His presence was unmistakable, as if he had been waiting for her all along. His eyes were like the night sky, deep and endless, and his skin shimmered faintly as though kissed by the stars. There was a sadness in his gaze, a sadness that Lira recognized immediately, though she couldn't quite place why. "I know what you are about to do," he said softly, his voice low and smooth like the wind. "And I know what you're feeling. Fear, uncertainty, the weight of the world upon your shoulders. But you are not alone, Lira. I will guide you." Lira hesitated, her heart swelling with a mixture of gratitude and doubt. "Who are you?" "I am a cursed prince," he replied, bowing his head slightly. "And I am bound to the skies. I can never touch the ground again, but I can help you if you will allow me." And so, with the prince by her side, Lira set out on her journey, knowing that every step forward brought her closer to the heart of the darkness, and to the awakening of the goddess within her. As Lira and the prince ventured further from the village, the air grew thinner, and the landscape began to change. The lush green fields gave way to rocky hills, and the sky above grew darker with each step, as though the very heavens were watching them. Lira felt the weight of the world pressing on her shoulders, but with the prince by her side, a strange sense of comfort settled over her. He never once complained about his curse, though Lira could see how it tormented him. He floated just above the ground, his feet never touching the earth, his form an ethereal presence that seemed to shimmer with moonlight. They traveled by night under the silvery glow of the moon, and by day they rested, hiding from prying eyes. It was during one of their nighttime journeys that the prince finally spoke of his curse, his voice barely a whisper in the cool night air. "I was once a powerful ruler," he said, his tone distant, as though he were recalling a life far removed from this one. "But my ambition led me to make a terrible pact with the Eclipse King. He cursed me, bound me to the skies, so that I could never again feel the earth beneath my feet. I watch from above, helpless as the world beneath me falls apart." Lira listened, her heart heavy for the prince, though he had tried to protect the world in his own way. His mistake had led to his downfall. Yet, there was a flicker of hope in his eyes, one that told Lira he still believed redemption was possible, even for someone like him. "You're not alone," Lira said softly, her voice filled with determination. "We'll face the Eclipse King together. I won't let you fight this battle alone." The prince looked at her, a small, sad smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "You truly are the last descendant of the moon goddess. Your heart is as bright as the stars themselves." Their journey continued through the night, the road ahead uncertain and fraught with danger. But with each step, Lira felt the moon goddess stir inside her, her power slowly awakening. The pull of the stars was growing stronger, and the weight of her destiny was becoming clearer. She had no choice but to continue, for the moon's light was fading, and the Eclipse King was growing stronger with every passing moment. As the days passed, Lira and the prince encountered several dangers along their journey, each more treacherous than the last. Yet, with each challenge, Lira's powers continued to grow. She began to feel an undeniable connection to the moon, as if it were pulsing through her veins, guiding her steps. The prince's presence, though bittersweet, was a source of quiet strength, and Lira found herself relying on his wisdom more than she had expected. One evening, as they neared the edge of a dense forest, they were confronted by a creature that seemed to emerge from the very shadows themselves. It was a massive winged beast, its eyes glowing an eerie, unnatural red, and its body covered in dark, shimmering scales. The air around it crackled with dark energy, the stench of rot and decay filling the air. Lira froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never seen a creature like this before, and fear surged through her. The prince, too, looked tense, his gaze fixed on the creature. He floated just above the ground, his body tensed, ready for battle, but there was something in his eyes that made Lira nervous. "Do not be afraid," the prince said, his voice calm yet firm. "This creature is a servant of the Eclipse King. It has been sent to test us." Lira took a deep breath and stepped forward. She had already faced so many trials on this journey, and this one would not be the end. She had to keep moving forward. Summoning the energy that flowed through her, she lifted her hand to the sky, calling upon the moon's power. The air around her began to shimmer as the moon's light filled the forest, casting an ethereal glow on the creature. With a mighty roar, the beast lunged toward them, its claws outstretched. Lira reacted instinctively. Her hand raised higher as she released a surge of moonlight. The creature howled as the light struck it, its form writhing and twisting in agony before it dissolved into shadow. The forest fell silent. The prince, his expression unreadable, finally spoke. "Well done, Lira. You are stronger than I thought." Lira, still breathing heavily, nodded but said nothing. She felt a sense of pride. She had fought back the darkness, if only for a moment. But the battle was far from over. The Eclipse King was growing closer, and the true test of her strength was yet to come. As Lira and the prince continued their journey, the path became even more difficult. The forest that had seemed so serene now felt oppressive, the trees towering above them like silent sentinels, their gnarled branches twisting and reaching toward the sky. The further they traveled, the colder the air became, and the stars in the night sky seemed to flicker with increasing urgency. It was as if the entire world was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Despite the growing tension, the bond between Lira and the prince deepened. They had come to rely on each other in ways neither had expected. The prince, with his quiet wisdom and ethereal presence, had become a source of strength for Lira, while she had become his anchor, the one person who truly understood the weight of his curse. One evening, as they sat by the fire, the prince finally opened up to Lira about his past. "Before the curse, I was not always a prince," he confessed, his voice soft but filled with regret. "I was once a man of ambition, driven by power. I sought to control the skies, to bend the stars to my will. But I was foolish. The Eclipse King offered me a deal, power beyond measure in exchange for my soul. I accepted, thinking I could outsmart him. But in the end, I was the one who was deceived." Lira listened quietly, her heart aching for him. She could see now that his curse was not just a punishment for his past mistakes. It was a constant reminder of the cost of his ambition. He had traded his humanity for power, and in doing so had lost everything. "But you are not beyond redemption," Lira said softly, placing a hand on his arm. "You can still choose a different path. You don't have to carry this burden forever." The prince looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and hope. "Perhaps you are right. Perhaps your light can reach me, even in the darkest of places." For a moment, they simply sat in silence, the flickering flames casting shadows on their faces. The weight of their journey hung heavy between them, but in that quiet moment, there was a sense of peace, a fleeting feeling that perhaps everything would be all right. But deep down, Lira knew that their trials were far from over. The Eclipse King's shadow loomed ever closer, and with it, the weight of her destiny. As the days stretched into weeks, the landscape began to change once again. The lush forests gave way to barren plains, where the wind howled endlessly, sweeping across the dry earth like a forgotten whisper. Lira could feel the temperature drop, the air becoming colder and heavier with each passing day. It was as if the world itself was being drained of its vitality, its colors fading to shades of gray. She knew the Eclipse King's influence was growing stronger, casting its dark shadow over the land. It was on one such bleak evening, as they traversed a particularly desolate stretch of land, that the prince spoke again. "We are nearing the temple," he said quietly, his gaze fixed ahead. "The ritual you must perform is not one that can be taken lightly. It requires a sacrifice." Lira turned to him, her heart sinking at his words. "What kind of sacrifice?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The prince hesitated, his eyes clouded with uncertainty. "The ritual requires you to offer your heart to the moon, to give up part of yourself in exchange for the power to stop the Eclipse King. It is a sacrifice that will leave you changed forever. It will not only be a sacrifice of your body, but of your very soul." Lira's heart pounded in her chest as she processed his words. She had known deep down that the path she was walking was not without cost. But hearing it spoken aloud made it all the more real. A sacrifice, her heart, her soul. Could she truly do it? "I don't know if I can do this," Lira whispered, the weight of the decision pressing heavily on her. "How can I give up part of myself? How can I face the world after this?" The prince floated beside her, his expression unreadable. "The sacrifice is not just about losing something, it's about gaining something greater. You will become the embodiment of the moon's light, a force of balance and protection. But to take on that power, you must be willing to let go of everything that holds you back." Lira nodded slowly, her heart torn. She knew that she could not walk away from this destiny. The world depended on her, and the Eclipse King's darkness would consume everything if she did not act. With a deep breath, Lira steeled herself for what lay ahead. The temple was close, and the time for choosing had arrived. She had to face the ritual, face the sacrifice, and embrace her divine heritage, no matter the cost. As the dawn broke over the horizon, casting the world in hues of soft pink and orange, Lira and the prince finally reached the entrance of the lost temple. It stood before them, an ancient structure carved into the side of a mountain, its stones weathered by centuries of wind and rain. The air around it was thick with a sense of foreboding, the very earth trembling as if it too feared the power that resided within. The prince floated silently beside Lira, his eyes somber as they gazed at the temple. "This is where it all began," he said, his voice filled with reverence. "This is the place where the goddess's power was sealed away, and where you must now reclaim it." Lira nodded, her heart racing as she stepped closer to the temple's entrance. The door was massive, engraved with symbols that shimmered faintly under the touch of the rising sun. It was as if the temple itself was alive, waiting for her. Her hand hovered just above the door, feeling the pulse of ancient magic that emanated from it. She could hear the faint whispers of the stars in her mind, urging her onward, but at the same time, a part of her hesitated. "Are you sure you're ready?" the prince asked quietly, his voice a soft echo in the silence. "Once you enter, there's no turning back." Lira looked at him, her eyes filled with determination. She had come too far to turn back now. The weight of the world rested on her shoulders, and the lives of countless people depended on the decision she was about to make. She placed her hand firmly on the door, feeling the warmth of the moon goddess stirring within her. The symbols on the door glowed brighter as her energy surged, and the massive stone door slowly creaked open. Inside, the temple was vast and empty, the walls lined with ancient carvings that told the story of the moon goddess. At the far end of the chamber stood an altar, bathed in a pool of pale light. The ritual chamber. Lira felt a cold chill wash over her, and she knew that the Eclipse King was close. She could feel his darkness creeping in, inching its way toward the temple's heart. She had no time to waste. With a deep breath, Lira stepped forward, the prince hovering silently behind her. She walked to the altar, her steps echoing in the hollow silence of the temple. Time had come. The ritual would begin. Lira approached the altar with a steady, determined heart, but inside, she felt a whirlwind of emotions. The air around her seemed to pulse with ancient power, the very walls of the temple resonating with the weight of centuries. She could feel the moon goddess's presence inside her, urging her to move forward, to complete what had been set in motion long before her birth. The prince, still floating beside her, watched silently, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and hope. He could not touch the ground, could not partake in the ritual, but he would be there for Lira in any way he could. She was the key to breaking both his curse and the Eclipse King's growing power. Lira reached the altar and knelt, her hands trembling as she touched the cold stone surface. At the center of the altar lay an intricate symbol, the same one she had seen in her dreams. It was a crescent moon surrounded by stars, a symbol of divine power and balance. The air around it shimmered with light, but there was a darkness within the symbol as well, a shadow that seemed to grow stronger with each passing second. "This is it," Lira whispered to herself, her voice barely audible as she stared at the symbol. "This is where I must choose." She knew what the ritual required. To awaken the full power of the moon goddess, she had to offer her heart, to give up part of herself, her humanity. It was the only way to restore balance, to stop the Eclipse King from consuming the moon and the world in eternal darkness. The darkness inside the symbol seemed to laugh at her hesitation, as if it knew she was torn. "Are you ready?" The prince's voice broke through her thoughts, soft but firm. "Remember, it is not just a sacrifice, but a gift. The power you gain from the goddess will allow you to stop the Eclipse King, but you will never be the same. You must embrace the change, for it is part of your destiny." Lira closed her eyes, her heart heavy with the weight of the decision. She had always felt like she didn't belong in the world, but now, in this moment, she realized that the world needed her to embrace who she truly was. She was the moon goddess's last descendant, and it was time to reclaim that power. With one final breath, she placed her hands on the altar's symbol and closed her eyes. The moonlight enveloped her, filling her with warmth. She could feel the goddess's power coursing through her, and she knew there was no turning back. The moment Lira's hands touched the moonlit symbol, a blinding surge of light exploded from the altar, wrapping her in an ethereal glow. The ground beneath her feet seemed to vanish, and for a moment she felt weightless, like she was floating among the stars, just as she had in her dreams. Her entire body hummed with the power of the goddess, the force of centuries of celestial energy coursing through her veins. It was as though the moon itself had become one with her soul, its light shining through every fiber of her being. But the light was not without its pain. Lira could feel her very essence being torn from her, her humanity slipping away, piece by piece. She gritted her teeth, forcing herself to endure the searing ache. The prince, watching helplessly from the edge of the altar, seemed to shimmer with concern, but he could do nothing. This was a trial she had to face alone. A voice, soft and ancient, whispered in her mind. "You are the keeper of the moon's light now, Lira. You are the bridge between the heavens and the earth. But remember, balance must be maintained. The darkness cannot be destroyed, only contained." Lira's breath caught in her throat. The weight of the responsibility was overwhelming, but she did not falter. She had chosen this path, and there was no turning back. The light around her began to intensify, filling every corner of the temple, illuminating the ancient carvings that lined the walls. The goddess's power surged inside her, her very essence becoming one with the stars above. For a moment, the world held its breath. The air thickened with the presence of the Eclipse King's looming darkness, a force that tried to seep into the temple, to swallow the light that Lira now carried. She could feel it, just on the edge of her consciousness, a cold, malevolent force hungry for power. It whispered in her mind, trying to pull her away from the ritual. "You are too weak," the voice of the Eclipse King hissed. "You cannot defeat me. You are nothing but a child lost in the stars." But Lira, now infused with the power of the moon goddess, refused to listen. She stood tall, her eyes blazing with silver light. "I am not weak. I am the moon's light. I will not let you consume it." The darkness writhed, but the light in her grew brighter, pushing it back. She felt her heart steady as she tapped into the full strength of the goddess. Her pulse synchronized with the rhythm of the universe. She was the balance. She was the light that would restore harmony to the world. As the moon's light inside Lira intensified, the temple trembled, its ancient stones creaking under the weight of the power that was being unleashed. The darkness of the Eclipse King fought back fiercely, but Lira stood unwavering, her heart now a beacon of pure, radiant energy. Every fiber of her being thrummed with the pulse of the universe, and she felt the presence of the goddess within her more clearly than ever before. She was no longer just a descendant. She was the living embodiment of the moon's power. The prince, watching from a distance, hovered silently, his eyes full of awe and something else, hope. Hope that at last, the curse that had bound him to the skies could be broken, that the light of the moon would free them both from the darkness. Lyra's hands, still resting on the altar's symbol, glowed brighter as she channeled the goddess's power. The air around her seemed to bend and shift, responding to the immense force she was commanding. She could feel the Eclipse King's presence growing stronger, its dark tendrils reaching out toward her, seeking to extinguish the light. But Lira, with a heart full of courage and determination, refused to give in. The voice of the Eclipse King echoed in her mind, this time louder, more desperate. "You cannot stop me. I am the shadow of the moon, the embodiment of what is forgotten. The light you wield is fragile, and you cannot hold it forever." But Lira knew the truth now. The light of the moon was not fragile. It was eternal. It had been there since the beginning of time, lighting the path of the stars and guiding those who had the courage to follow it. She was the last heir to that ancient power, and she would not let the darkness consume what had been entrusted to her. With a final surge of strength, Lira's voice rang out, clear and powerful. "I will not allow you to devour the world, Eclipse King. You will not steal the light of the moon. I will protect it, no matter the cost." In that instant, the light around her exploded in a burst of dazzling brilliance, flooding the temple. The darkness that had encroached on the temple recoiled, its form twisting and writhing as it tried to escape the intensity of Lira's power. The power of the moon goddess, the light of the stars, had finally broken through. The blinding light engulfed the temple, illuminating every corner, every crack in the stone walls. The force of it was overwhelming, as if the entire universe had chosen that moment to focus its energy on Lira. She stood at the center, her body alight with the purest of moonlight, her hair billowing around her like a silvery veil. The Eclipse King, whose shadow had loomed over the earth, now writhed in agony, its power disintegrating under the force of Lira's brilliance. She felt the presence of the dark force retreat, its malevolent whispers fading into nothingness, but she knew that it wasn't truly gone. The Eclipse King had been banished, but not destroyed. Its essence, a part of the balance of the universe, would always remain. And so, with a deep breath, Lira released the last of her energy, sending one final wave of moonlight through the temple, sealing away the darkness. For a long moment everything was still. The temple, once filled with the tension of battle, now rested in an eerie calm. Lyra's chest heaved as she struggled to catch her breath, her limbs heavy with the weight of the energy she had just wielded. Her heart still pounded, but now it was no longer out of fear. It was a rhythm of triumph, of peace finally restored. She turned to the prince, who floated nearby, his gaze soft with admiration and relief. The curse that had bound him to the skies seemed to weaken, as if the moon's power was lifting it, breaking the chains of his imprisonment. The prince's feet hovered just above the ground for the first time in what felt like an eternity. His face was a mask of quiet joy, his eyes reflecting the same moonlit glow that now filled the temple. "You did it, Lira," he whispered, his voice filled with awe. "You are the light of the moon. You've restored the balance. You've saved the world." Lira smiled, though her body still felt drained. Her heart was at peace now, knowing she had fulfilled her purpose, but there was also a deep sadness. She had given so much of herself to the goddess, to the moon, and while the world was saved, she knew that she would never be the same. The ritual had changed her, transformed her into something beyond human, beyond mortal understanding. And yet, as she gazed at the prince, she felt a deep sense of connection. She had not lost herself, she had simply become more. She had become the moon's eternal light, a force of balance and protection, not just for the world, but for herself as well. The temple was still bathed in the soft glow of the moonlight, the energy in the air now calm and steady. The oppressive darkness that had once filled the space had lifted, replaced by a serene peace. Lira stood tall, though she was still weak from the immense power she had called upon. The temple, once a place of ancient secrets and danger, now felt like a sacred sanctuary, a place where the forces of light and dark had met and been forever changed. The prince hovered beside her, still adjusting to the newfound freedom of his feet. His expression was one of awe, but also of quiet gratitude. "The curse," he murmured. "It's lifting. The moon's power is breaking it." Lira nodded, though her thoughts were elsewhere. She could still feel the weight of her choice pressing on her heart. She had sacrificed part of herself, her humanity, to wield the moon's power, and in doing so, had become something different. The change had been necessary, but it came with a price. She no longer felt entirely human. The connection to the goddess was stronger than ever, but it came at the cost of her previous life. The path ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain: the world was safe for now. She looked at the prince, who now stood beside her, his feet finally touching the earth. His eyes, filled with a mix of hope and sorrow, met hers. "You've changed everything, Lira. The world is safe because of you, and so am I. I am no longer bound to the skies. The curse is broken." Lira smiled softly, but there was a sadness in her gaze. "I haven't just saved the world," she said quietly. "I've become something else. Something beyond what I once was." The prince nodded, understanding what she meant. "Yes," he said gently. "But perhaps that's exactly what the world needed. You are the light of the moon, and that light will guide us all. Your sacrifice was not in vain." For a moment, they simply stood together, the weight of everything they had been through resting between them. But Lira knew that their journey was not over. The balance had been restored, but the world would always need guardians, ones who understood both the light and the darkness. And so, with the prince by her side, Lira turned to leave the temple, knowing that her path was now one of protection and balance. The moon's light would always guide her, but now it was time for her to find her own way in this new world, where light and darkness coexisted, and where her heart could still find peace. The air outside the temple felt different now. The oppressive darkness that had once consumed the land had been banished, and in its place, a gentle breeze stirred through the trees, as if the earth itself was breathing again. Lira and the prince stood at the temple's entrance, gazing out at the world they had saved. The landscape, once dull and lifeless, now seemed to hum with quiet vitality, the colors of the world beginning to return as if the land was awakening from a long, unnatural slumber. Lira felt the weight of the moon's power still pulsing through her, but it was no longer overwhelming. It had settled within her, becoming a part of her soul, like the quiet glow of a distant star. She had sacrificed much, but in return, she had gained something even greater, something that would remain with her for the rest of her life. The prince, standing beside her, seemed lighter, his curse broken. His feet now firmly on the earth, he looked to Lira with gratitude. His eyes soft but filled with something more. Hope perhaps, or perhaps something deeper. "Thank you, Lira," he said quietly. "For everything." Lira met his gaze, a faint smile touching her lips. "I didn't do it alone," she replied. "We did this together." The prince nodded, the unspoken understanding between them settling like a quiet warmth. They had both faced darkness, both been touched by it in different ways. But now, as the world began to heal, they both knew that they had played their part in bringing it back to balance. Lira turned toward the path that led back into the world. The journey had been long, and it was far from over. There would always be new challenges, new forces that sought to disrupt the peace they had fought so hard to restore. But now, she was no longer just an orphan from a small village. She was a guardian of the moon's light, a protector of the balance between the earth and the heavens. As the prince walked beside her, his presence a quiet comfort, Lira knew that her story was far from finished. The world was vast, and though her heart still carried the weight of the choices she had made, she felt something else too, a deep sense of peace, knowing that she had found her true purpose. The moon's light would always guide her, and she would never again be lost. Together they walked into the light of the new dawn, where the sun rose to greet them, and the moon's gentle glow lingered, a reminder of all that had been sacrificed, and all that had been saved. As Lira and the prince ventured further into the world they had saved, they encountered the many faces of life returning to its natural rhythm. The once barren fields were now vibrant with the colors of blooming flowers, the trees budding with fresh green leaves. The air itself seemed lighter, filled with the hum of insects and the soft rustle of life stirring once more. It was as if the earth had been reborn, no longer under the shadow of the Eclipse King's dark influence. The villagers who had long lived in the quiet shadow of fear, now emerged from their homes, their faces lifting toward the sky. They saw the light of the moon glowing brightly, and they knew, without words, that the darkness had been vanquished. They had no idea who the mysterious girl and the prince were, or what sacrifices they had made, but they sensed the peace that had settled over their world, and they rejoiced in it. Lira, though her heart still felt the weight of her transformation, found solace in the sight of these simple moments of life returning. She watched as children ran through the fields, laughing, their faces full of joy, and her heart swelled. It was a peace she had fought for, a peace that she had given so much to protect. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Lira and the prince found themselves standing on a hill overlooking the village. The moon, full and bright, rose high in the sky, casting its silver light over the land below. It was a symbol of what had been restored, a reminder of the balance that Lira had fought to protect. The prince, standing beside her, spoke quietly. "The world is healing, Lira. You did it. You saved everything, even me." Lira smiled softly, her gaze fixed on the moon. "We saved it together," she replied. "And the world will always need protectors, those who understand both the light and the dark." For a moment there was silence between them, comfortable and understanding. Though their paths had been marked by hardship and sacrifice, they had both found their place in the world. Lira, the embodiment of the moon's light, and the prince, freed from his curse, standing together in the quiet after the storm. The journey ahead would be long and the road uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, Lira felt at peace. The moon's light guided her now, but it was no longer just a force of power. It was a part of who she had become. She was no longer lost. As time passed, Lira and the prince traveled far and wide, their bond growing stronger with each new step. They visited villages, cities, and towns, each time bringing the light of the moon with them, restoring hope where darkness had once reigned. People would whisper of the girl with the moonlight in her eyes, and the prince who had once been bound to the skies. Their legend grew, and with it, the understanding that light and darkness could coexist. One did not need to consume the other. In every corner of the world, there were remnants of the Eclipse King's shadow, whispers of those who had once fallen under his sway, still lingering in the corners of society. Lira knew that her journey was not just about restoring balance. It was about helping the world find its way again. She had been chosen not just as a warrior of the light, but as a healer, someone who could remind the world of its potential to heal and grow, no matter how deep the scars. One evening, as they sat by a campfire, the prince spoke once more of his past, of the endless skies he had once roamed, and the endless longing for the earth beneath his feet. "You've given me everything," he said, his voice soft, filled with reverence. "You have shown me that there is life beyond the curse, that even those who have fallen can rise again." Lira looked at him, her gaze steady, a gentle smile playing at the corners of her lips. "You've given me something too," she said. "I've learned that power doesn't come from taking everything. It comes from giving, from understanding that sacrifice is part of the greater balance. And with that, I can be who I am meant to be." The prince's eyes softened. "We've both changed, haven't we? We've become who we needed to be," Lira replied. The night was quiet, save for the crackling of the fire. The stars above shimmered like ancient memories, and the moon shone brightly, casting its soft glow over the world. For a moment, the peace they had fought so hard for seemed perfect, whole, as though time itself had paused to honor the journey they had completed. But Lira knew, deep in her soul, that this was not the end. Their mission was not just to defeat the darkness, but to help the world embrace the light once again. With the prince by her side, she was ready for whatever came next. Because the moon's light, though eternal, was never meant to shine alone. In the months that followed, Lira and the prince continued their journey, ever vigilant, always seeking ways to bring light to the darkest corners of the world. They encountered remnants of the Eclipse King's influence in the form of corrupted lands, villages haunted by fear, and people lost in despair. Yet with every step, Lira's powers grew stronger, and her understanding of the delicate balance between light and darkness deepened. One day, they arrived at a city that had long been untouched by the sun. Its streets were dim, and the people moved like shadows, their eyes hollow with grief. The city had once been prosperous, a place of culture and knowledge, but now it was drowning in the Eclipse King's forgotten reign. A sense of hopelessness hung in the air, as if the city itself had forgotten what it was to be alive. As they walked through the streets, Lira could feel the weight of the darkness that clung to the place. It was not an external force, but something born from within, the people's own fear and despair. They had been without light for so long that they had forgotten how to find their way back. The prince, standing beside her, looked at the people with a somber expression. "They don't believe in the light anymore," he said quietly. "They have been so consumed by the shadow that they cannot remember what it feels like to hope." Lira nodded, understanding the depth of their suffering. But she also understood that this was where she was meant to be. She was not just the goddess's descendant, She was a guide, a beacon for those lost in the dark. "They don't need to remember the light," she said softly. "They need to see it again. I will show them." That evening, under the full moon, Lira stood in the center of the city's great square. The streets were eerily quiet, and the people gathered, drawn by an unspoken pull, uncertain of what to expect. With a deep breath, Lira raised her arms to the sky, calling upon the power of the moon that still pulsed within her. The light that radiated from her was soft at first, a mere flicker, but as she focused, it grew, spreading through the city like a slow, deliberate wave. The light did not blind them. It caressed them, gently awakening the memories they had buried so deep. The people stood in awe as the moon's glow touched every corner of the city, every face. Slowly, they began to remember what it was like to feel warmth, to feel hope. The darkness began to lift, not with force, but with patience, with a gentle reminder that the light had never truly left them. The prince watched, his heart filled with awe and pride. "You've done it, Lira. You've shown them the way." Lira smiled softly, her heart full of peace. "I didn't do it alone. The light was always here. I just helped them see it again." And with that, the city, once lost in shadow, began to heal. It was a slow process, but the first steps had been taken. The people, no longer bound by fear, began to rebuild, to remember what it was like to live in the light. The days that followed were filled with change. As Lira and the prince continued their journey through the world, more cities, towns, and villages welcomed them, and each time, they saw the same flicker of hope being reignited in the hearts of the people. The Eclipse King's shadow, though no longer as dark as it once was, still lingered in the far corners of the earth, and there would always be those who struggled to believe in the light. But Lira knew that the fight was never about defeating darkness entirely. It was about helping the world remember that light was always within reach, waiting to be embraced. One evening, as they sat on a hill overlooking a vast forest, the prince turned to Lira, his expression thoughtful. "You've brought so much light to this world, Lira," he said, his voice low and filled with wonder. "And yet, I sense that you're still searching for something." Lira looked out over the horizon, where the first stars were beginning to appear. The moon hung low, casting a gentle glow across the land. She had always felt an emptiness within her, even as she embraced her destiny. The sacrifices she had made, the transformation she had undergone, had left her with a strange sense of displacement, as though she were no longer entirely human, no longer completely tied to the world she had once known. Her heart still longed for something more, something beyond the battles she had fought and the power she had inherited. "I'm not sure what I'm looking for," Lira admitted softly. "I've saved the world, I've found my place as the moon's light, but there's still a part of me that feels disconnected. I thought that once I fulfilled my purpose, I would feel complete. But I don't know if I ever will." The prince was silent for a long moment, watching her closely. Finally he spoke, his voice gentle but certain. "Perhaps the purpose you've been seeking is not just about what you can give to the world, but what the world can give to you. Perhaps it's not about finding something outside yourself, but learning to embrace who you've become and finding peace in that." Lira turned to look at him, her heart swelling with both gratitude and uncertainty. "But how can I embrace this new life when it feels like it's too much to carry?" The prince smiled, his eyes reflecting the calm light of the moon. "By accepting that you've already given so much, and by allowing yourself the grace to rest. The light you carry is eternal, Lira, but that doesn't mean you must always be its beacon. It's okay to step back, to find balance within yourself. You don't need to carry the weight of the world on your own." Lira nodded, taking in his words. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to breathe, to release the constant pressure of saving others. She had given so much, and now, perhaps it was time to give herself the gift of peace. The world would continue to turn, and the moon would always shine in the night sky, but it was okay for her to rest, to find her own light in the stillness of her heart. Lyra's heart felt lighter as the days passed. The weight that had burdened her, the expectation of always being the savior, the protector, began to lift piece by piece. It was not that she had forgotten her duty, but rather that she had learned to embrace her place in the world, to allow herself the freedom to exist as both a force of light and a person who, like everyone else, needed moments of rest, moments of stillness. The prince, too, seemed to have found a sense of peace. His curse fully lifted, his feet finally able to touch the earth without restriction. Though he had once been bound to the sky, he now walked beside her, not as a companion driven by duty, but as a partner, someone who understood the delicate balance between light and dark, power and peace. They had both changed, both grown, and as they walked together, they no longer felt the weight of their past mistakes. One evening, as they reached a quiet lake surrounded by tall trees, they paused to take in the beauty of the still waters, the moonlight reflecting off its surface like a mirror of the sky. It was a place of serenity, a sanctuary from the chaos of the world. The air was cool, the sounds of night creatures filling the silence. They sat together by the water's edge, the prince beside her, the soft light of the moon casting its glow over everything. For the first time in many months, Lira felt truly at peace. The world no longer seemed like an endless battle. The moon, her guiding light, no longer felt like a burden. It felt like a gift. And in that moment, she realized that perhaps she didn't need to keep searching for what was missing. It had always been within her. She was not just the last descendant of the moon goddess, but also a person capable of love, of compassion, of rest. The prince looked at her, his expression calm, content. "Do you feel it too?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "The world is finally at peace. And so are we." Lira nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Yes," she said softly. "We've found our place. Not in the struggle, but in the quiet moments of grace. We've restored the balance, not just in the world, but in ourselves." The stars twinkled above them, the moon casting its gentle light, as if affirming her words. The journey had been long, and there had been moments of doubt, of darkness. But now they had found their peace together, under the eternal light of the moon. Lira closed her eyes, letting the cool night air wash over her, her heart finally at rest. She had fulfilled her destiny, and now she could simply be. "Sweet dreams,"